Tonight, what Trump's Iran move means for everyone else, the CIA's secret airline, and the Armenian revolution succeeds. Two years ago, Israeli soldier Alor Azaria was caught on video, killing a Palestinian man who was already badly wounded. Today, Azaria walked out of prison to a hero's welcome. Virginia and Maryland are offering a look at what health insurance might cost now that Congress has killed the individual mandate. Insurers want to charge way more. A new survey of 18 to 24-year-olds across the Middle East shows that since 2016, the U.S. has gone from being seen as an ally to an enemy. Former New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman is under investigation after 4 women accused him of violent physical abuse. In public, Schneiderman has positioned himself as a defender of women, supporting the Me Too movement and taking Harvey Weinstein to court.
The United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. We will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction. Any nation that helps Iran in its quest for nuclear weapons could also be strongly sanctioned by the United States.
The decision wasn't exactly a surprise. It caps off more than a year of presidential trash talk and interim steps. First, he decertified the deal, and in January, he waived sanctions one last time, but vowed never to do it again. What's new today is that the president is reinstating the actual penalties against Iran that the deal had lifted, and beginning a grand new experiment with high stakes for the entire world.
Trump's announcement today that the U.S. would reimpose sanctions on Iran that had been lifted in exchange for putting the brakes on their nuclear weapons program doesn't just affect Iran. It affects countries, companies, and banks that were given freedom to do some business with Iran post-nuclear deal. These are known as secondary sanctions.
A secondary sanction is basically a threat against non-US entities, that if you choose to do business with Iran, we might sanction you. So if you're a German bank or a Chinese manufacturing firm, you have to make a decision. Do we want to do business with the United States or do we want to do business with Iran? And that was the bulk of the JCPOA. We gave up the secondary sanctions, and Iran allowed strict limits on their nuclear program and strict inspections of those limits.
Jared Blanc works for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace now. But before that, he was responsible for the implementation of the Iran nuclear deal with a focus on sanctions. He wasn't surprised by the president's announcement.
Horseshit.
You know, my reaction is that this is incoherent. You've got the president walking out and saying, our core objective is to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, and then trying to tear up the agreement that has prevented Iran from moving toward a nuclear weapon.
The president's decision affects not only international banks and businesses, but American companies as well, including Boeing and General Electric. Boeing was expecting to create 18,000 jobs here in the United States from a deal to sell 30 planes to an Iranian-based airline. Does this cause any kind of economic problems within the United States?
Well, the Boeing deal was much bigger than 30 planes. They had their sale to Iran Air in 2016 was, I think, 80 planes plus. And then there was another 30-plane deal announced last year. So those are big, big numbers for Boeing. I think it was the single largest contract Boeing had in 2016. And also there are going to be effects most likely in the oil markets. I think we've already seen some upward pressure on oil prices. There's certainly a prospect that Americans are going to be paying more when they drive from their summer holidays.
And why is that?
Well, because the U.S. is threatening allies and partners to buy less Iranian oil. So if there's less oil on the market, or even if people aren't following along with the threat, but they're concerned about what the implications might be, there's going to be a fear of tightness in the oil markets, which could drive up prices.
Now, some people thought Trump would give some exemptions to American companies or other countries to continue to do business with Iran. That didn't happen today. So the deal for businesses, American or foreign, you'll have 90 or 180 days to wrap up your dealings with Iran, or you'll lose access to the American financial system. The idea here? squeeze Iran's economy until they have no choice but to come back to the table with terms the president likes. It's basically what the United States did to get Iran to negotiate in the first place. The difference this time, our international partners aren't on our side.
Some of our partners before the JCPOA are not going to follow along here. Governments are going to find ways to help their businesses continue doing business in Iran. So will there be economic problems for Iran as a result of this decision? Sure. Will it be the same amount of pressure leverage that we built up before the JCPOA? No.
What does the US get out of this?
Well, we might get isolated from our closest allies and partners, and we might get Iran rebuilding its full enrichment capacity and having, again, an ambiguous nuclear program. But that's it. We're not getting any benefits out of this decision.
Gina Haspel will go before the Senate Intelligence Committee tomorrow for her confirmation hearing to be the next CIA director. Haspel almost withdrew last week, according to the Washington Post, rather than face senators' questions about her time running a CIA black site in Thailand in 2002, and torture that may have happened there on her watch. In the months after 9/11, the CIA flew detainees to those sites, often in countries where torture was commonplace, through a process called extraordinary rendition. The federal government has done its best to keep the details of that program a secret. But two regular citizens in North Carolina think they've found some answers in their own backyard.
When you guys do something like go into an airport trying to get answers, is there a plan or is it a little haphazard sometimes? You just go see what happens.
It's haphazard.
Christina Cowger and Allison Kaysen are not professional investigators. One's a plant researcher, the other a realtor. For the past decade, they've been on a mission to expose the secrets of the CIA's post-9/11 torture program. Or at least this very local piece of it.
You have an appointment?
Not yet, but we'd like to make one.
He is in Raleigh right now. So there's really nobody here that can talk to you.
Nobody else could
No?
speak to us?
No, he's the spokesperson, so you need to talk to him about that.
They call their visits to Johnston County Regional Airport part of their torture taxi tour.
Helen, you've been here a long time, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, would you like to make a statement about what's going down
No.
at the south end of the airport?
No.
Their real focus is not the airport and its staff, none of whom have been implicated in any wrongdoing, but a company that's based there, Aero Contractors.
So I guess if I show you what means the most to me, these photos of people who were rendered by Aero Contractors.
Allison Kaysen first heard about some funny business involving Aero during casual chit-chat at a Boy Scout campout. In 2005, the New York Times reported more details, that the company was a CIA front, intimately involved in the extraordinary rendition program. Aero didn't respond to a call from Vice News. The CIA declined to comment. But there's reason to think they're onto something. Investigators have long tracked the tail numbers of planes involved in the rendition program. Last fall, one of them told a citizens' commission the women are part of that 80% of those flights between September 2001 and March 2004 were operated by Aero. Why are you so focused on this airport?
Because the rendition flights begin here and end here, and it's in my backyard. I can't say that I would feel the same if it were in Missouri. I know the people involved. I know their social standing in the community. And I know that rendition and torture are wrong. As a person of faith, I have to stand up.
One of the things I find so interesting is, at this point, more than 15 years after this program started, you guys are still asking for an investigation.
Right, crazy, isn't it?
Like, there are basic facts you don't know.
Right. But we feel like we have enough information to warrant an investigation.
What are you trying to get? You're going to the Johnston
County commissioners tonight.
tonight. What are you trying to achieve there?
We would like for them to adopt a policy that won't allow rendition flights out of their airport. We've asked them that before. We'd like them to take the information we've given them and ask for an investigation of aero contractors, and ultimately to revoke the lease of aero contractors and not allow our state-funded airports to be used to facilitate the RDI program.
And we gave you some requests for action, but really what we're asking for tonight is a formal response to those requests.
Did we have a secret prison here? Did these commissioners hide one single person from that had been that special rendition?
We've never suggested that, have we?
So all you're suggesting is that Arrow's the CIA operative. I don't know that. And you can come to local government and we give you an audience. You don't go, why aren't you picketing at the White House, the congressional offices, the Senate, the North Carolina legislature, the governors, the U.S. Attorney General?
We're North Carolinians, just like you. So we have a responsibility here in this state.
I hope you do, and I appreciate your passion, but you sit here and you can get this audience in front of us because you can't get it with the governor. So you're putting it on local government, and it does tire us. Anyone else?
So what is your response to our request?
Well, I read the evidence, and we've been doing this for years, 15 years, and I'm not seeing any new evidence.
It's going to go on.
I have a motion to adjourn. A second. Further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
He's actually in my jurisdiction.
You're upset.
I am.
Why?
I live here. These guys are elected by the citizens of Johnston County, and they continue to ignore this issue.
They have a right to disagree with you.
They do. They also have an obligation to the people of Johnston County and North Carolina to step up to the plate.
Do you think you're at a dead end?
If we are, we're going to plow through it, right? That's what we have to do. We'll just keep coming back.
Over a 6-year period, drug wholesalers dumped 780 million hydrocodone and oxycodone pills into West Virginia, the state with the highest opioid overdose rate in the country. That's 433 pain pills for every man, woman, and child. Now Congress is investigating the small group of distributors that have overwhelming control of the supply chain, asking what they knew and why they didn't stop it. Vice News met with West Virginia Representative David McKinley before he asked his own questions on Capitol Hill.
So this is a 1 and 2. So I want to be able to, if we can't get them on one, we're going to get them on the other.
Right.
All right. So I think this is going to be pretty powerful. There's something bigger in this issue, and what we're trying to find, who's causing it? Is it the pharmacies? Is it the doctors? Is it the wholesalers that are continuing to ship in 800 million pills into West Virginia? I want to hear whether they regret what they've done. I want to find out if they have shame for what they've done to families all across America. I don't think there's a family. When we go back in the district, I'm constantly talking to people. We've had roundtables. We had 6 roundtables on opioids last week. 6 in just 1 week. We continue to have these to understand what the problem is. I have yet to go to a meeting that someone in their family hasn't been touched. All right, so then we're going to go back to the string of accountabilities.
Right. The doctors, the pharmacies, they're all being held accountable. And,
yeah. Should they?
Yes.
But I want it to be a tough question to answer.
Yes.
I'd also go back to their testimony because they're shifting the blame. They're saying we're just
logistics.
We're just logistics. Right. We're middlemen.
Yeah.
But everybody else in the supply chain is being held responsible.
Well, I don't understand their difference between that and the pharmacy.
Right.
If the pharmacies can go to prison, why aren't they?
And then,
as you said, if there are no orders, they still get a responsibility.
Right.
Okay. So then I think we got them jammed on that too.
Yep. I don't think they're going to see that one coming.
I hope not. But unfortunately, I'm last.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're representing 90% of all the all drugs.
Yeah.
They have 90% of the market.
Share.
Okay. So we got the big boys in here.
Yes.
Given that this community was ravaged by opioid deaths. Don't you take responsibility for what was happening back then?
We take all of these matters very seriously.
I don't feel qualified to give a percentage of responsibility. I believe that we've got a role in an integrated healthcare system.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by solve.
We ship 100,000 orders a day. It's not feasible that I know about all the orders.
I don't believe we had a breakdown in our system.
I'm from West Virginia. We've been hearing about it all day today. The fury inside me right now is bubbling over with how we're going to address this problem. And for several of you to say you had no role whatsoever in this, I find it particularly offensive. Deflecting responsibility, saying I just had to fill the order. No, you had a role. Do you regret any role that your company has played in this crisis?
Robertson, I don't know how you could look at this crisis and not feel terrible about what's going on in this country.
You do regret.
I feel terrible about this.
That what McKesson did in participating in this scourge that's ravaged this country. You regret it.
I feel terrible about the crisis.
So what's the proper accountability? What's the punishment? Well, it's always deflecting the responsibility that they have. It can't be all the docs and the pharmacies. These distributors were bringing in 800 million pills into West Virginia, and they knew it.
A year ago this month, the Brazilian government declared an end to the Zika epidemic. But there's a legacy of the outbreak that's only beginning to come to light. Thousands of children born with congenital Zika syndrome, a previously unknown collection of birth defects.
Em janeiro de 2015 eu estava grávida e não sabia. E em fevereiro peguei a Zika. Todos os médicos disseram que iam morrer antes do tempo. Antes de 2 anos, antes de 1 ano, eles morreriam.
Jacqueline Vieira's son, Daniel, is now 2.5 years old. He hasn't developed the ability to swallow, and he has frequent seizures. But he's gotten better, more responsive and able to control his muscles.
Então, assim, até hoje, quando ele fez o último exame do LCR, ele mostrou que ainda tem vírus ativo no cérebro dele.
When Daniel was born, Jacqueline quit her job to devote all her time to him. He gets special treatment at a nonprofit multiple times a week.
Daniel, ele faz físio, fono e terapia ocupacional e psicólogo.
What do your doctors tell you now about Daniel and his prospects for the future?
Depende do profissional. Tem profissional que diz que teu filho não vai evoluir, mas tem uns que diz que ele vai evoluir.
Daniel is one of about 3,000 children in Brazil with congenital Zika syndrome, the neurological disorder that affects children whose mothers contracted Zika during pregnancy. Most of them are here in the Northeast, a hot region with plentiful standing water and inadequate infrastructure, the kind of place where mosquito-borne diseases spread quickly. This is where the Zika outbreak started in 2015, and it's where doctors first noticed the virus was connected to a sudden wave of babies born with microcephaly. That turned out to be only one of many symptoms.
Criança que tem comprometimento neurológico grave, ela tem espectro de complicações, né, que vai desde uma criança que tem comprometimento motor, comprometimento visual, comprometimento auditivo, que é menos frequente, né, e de artrogripose, que são malformações dos membros. E outro grande problema em relação à síndrome congênita de Zika vírus é a epilepsia.
Zika itself has existed for a really long time. Why is congenital Zika syndrome a new thing?
Especificamente aqui no Brasil, 2015, 2016, houve uma mutação que foi capaz de aumentar a virulência, a gravidade e provocar essas alterações intraútero.
The Altino Ventura Foundation is a free clinic that specializes in eye care and physical therapy. Early in the epidemic, doctors there discovered that babies born with microcephaly also had distinctive scarring on their retinas.
Cadê? A luz. Brilhinho.
That became one way to diagnose congenital Zika syndrome. After helping identify the syndrome, the foundation started coming up with ways to treat it and to continue to study it. Every week, 156 children come in for therapies designed to stimulate their senses and encourage their motor skills.
When they were born, we didn't even know if they were going to survive for 2 years. And they have. I think it's important to mention that we are learning with the disease and that every day is a different day.
Bora lá, cadê a borboletinha? Tá pura a borboleta? Levanta a cabeça pra tu ver a borboleta. Levanta mais, mamãe.
Tailani dos Santos has been bringing her daughter to the foundation every week for about a year.
Da visão, ela presta mais atenção, ela fixa o olho na pessoa. E a fisioterapia também, ela pega nas coisas, ela olha e quer pegar. Ajudou bastante mesmo.
These families are lucky in the scheme of things. The Altino Ventura Foundation has a waiting list of 100 people, and there aren't many like it in the country. The clinic depends on government funding, but it gets the same amount of money it got before Zika, with no new funds to increase capacity. The epidemic coincided with a period of economic and political crisis in Brazil. Public health budgets had already been strained for years.
Eu acho que a grande dificuldade da síndrome congênita do Zika vírus é, de repente, ao mesmo tempo, num período de menos de 6 meses, você ter 400 crianças acometidas por um quadro neurológico grave. Tivesse a condição, não, vamos criar mais centros, vamos contratar, às vezes você não tem nem equipe especializada.
To help fill some of the gaps in the help they get from the government, a group of women whose children have Zika syndrome founded a nonprofit named UMA, the Union of Mothers of Angels. Jacqueline volunteers there every day.
Hoje a gente vê o que, assim, o que eu passo, tem uma mãe que passa a mesma coisa. E eu amo o que eu faço.
What's your greatest hope for how far Daniel develops?
Meu desejo hoje é que meu filho tenha uma qualidade de vida melhor. Não que ele vai correr, vai andar, vai falar, mas eu desejo que ele tenha uma saúde estável. Fazendo yoga. Fazendo yoga. E eu vejo que ele é uma criança muito feliz. E me faz feliz. Isso é o que importa.
Nikol Pashinyan won a seat in parliament for the first time less than 2 years ago. Today, the journalist turned activist became Prime Minister of Armenia.
It isn't my success. It's success of our nation. And when we started this process, we said that our goal to create an opportunity for our people, and after that, it's up to people use this opportunity or not.
The 42-year-old Pashinyan got there by tapping into growing resentment with a corrupt elite, which has run the country ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union. As an opposition leader, Pashinyan roused a grassroots movement to demand an early parliamentary election and the resignation of Serge Sargsyan, a former president who tried to stay in power as prime minister.
Every nation has the sense of self-protection. Our people saw that it is a chance that shouldn't be missed.
He drummed up support on foot, walking village to village to encourage Armenians to hold nonviolent protests across the country. They listened to him. Instead of burning tires, Pashinyan supporters waved the national flag and danced in the streets.
Where I was working as a journalist, the goal and the target of my job was the same. Rule of law, democracy, fight against corruption.
The government resisted at first and refused to elect Pashinyan as prime minister, even though he was the only candidate for the job. And that only drove more people to protest on his behalf. The success of Pashinyan's peaceful uprising is unprecedented in the former Soviet state. But the new prime minister now has to deal with the day-to-day business of governing, addressing a stalled economy that's left a third of the country in poverty.
My message to Armenian people, it's time. The best life for us, it's life in our country.
Fucking awesome. That song made me realize what a huge dick I am. I like it. It's big production, but it's not oversmashed, where you can hear too much compression or too much auto-tune. And obviously, Jennifer Hudson doesn't need any auto-tune anyway. You can hear her. That's the part that'll actually kind of stab you with your little feelings knife. So it's really nice to hear her using her physical machine to make the sounds that she then forces out like a laser, because she's a badass. It's dramatic and makes you set up a scene in your mind. I love that it's kind of serious piano, but then, kind of Hollywood horror movie. It's a darker punctuation. They're obviously thinking more of it as like a soundscape. In the headphones, there's the vocals mostly in here, and then right about here, there's like a car door alarm that kind of becomes the lead vocal. The vocals are kind of like the caramel. The car door is like the lead vocal, but a little bit of salt on the caramel up there around the chocolate. It's great.
Though my friends tell me not to, I forgive you, even when it's so hard to.
Somebody was actually playing a tender cowbell. That's one of those songs like you hear a few times and then you have a crappy day and you're leaving the Walgreens and it's on and you're like, maybe I have to cry in my car. I'm not sure.